The stories in this podcast may contain content not suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Oh, welcome. I didn't hear you come in. No, it's no trouble at all. I'm always glad to see you. Please come in. Make yourself comfortable. Have a seat. I happen to have some new strange stories for you here on Madame Strangeways. Dearest strangelings, if you have a true strange story you'd like to hear narrated on the podcast, you can submit it on madamestrangeways.com or email it to madamestrangeways@gmail.com. That's Madam with an E at the end, MADAME. And if you're enjoying your time here, please share the Strangeways strangeness with a friend, or follow the podcast, or even rate or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Rating and sharing help guide other spirits and listeners to the podcast. And now, without further ado, on to the strange stories. Untitled by Anonymous. Sorry for the long post, but the backstory is necessary. I work overnight as an RN on a pediatric ICU floor. Most of our patients are sedated, paralyzed, tracheostomy and ventilator dependent, etc. One side of the floor is where our acute trauma kids go, severe accidents, drownings, etc. And the other side is where our chronic kids go. These are usually the kids that are termed our frequent flyers. When they're not in the hospital, they live at a facility that provides 24-hour medical care. Once they get discharged, it's only a matter of time before they're back, usually 2 to 3 weeks, usually due to respiratory failure. Most of them do not have parents that visit or call. They just lay there staring at the ceiling and get their medications and tube feedings. It's very depressing on that side. One of my patients was a chronic kid. She was 5 years old. Her medical history was incredibly complex. She was trach and ventilator dependent. She was delayed, but she was with it, so to speak. Every time she was readmitted to our floor and I had her as a patient, she would smile the biggest smile when I'd walk in at the start of my shift. I made it a point to sing her songs and make her smile. Since she had a trach and was hooked to the vent, she wasn't able to make noise. So when she would cry, it was silent, and you would just see the tears streaming down her face. She absolutely loved the movie Frozen. It always made her stop crying. If I would walk in and the movie was finished, she would tug on the sleeve of my scrub to play it again, and I would. That was our thing. I didn't mind being on the chronic side as much when she was there. I care for all of my patients, but she held a special spot, and I believe she knew it. She was discharged back to the medical facility she lived at. It had been a while since she came back this time, maybe 2 to 3 months. But when she did, she looked bad. Worse than ever. She required way more oxygen than her usual baseline this time. She had lost a lot of weight. She was already very small for her age. Her eyes were sunken. It hurt me to see her that way. I did my dances and my songs, and she didn't smile. I would talk to her and she wouldn't react. She wasn't really tracking and following with her eyes. She wasn't herself anymore. She was clearly deteriorating. This was expected due to the multiple congenital issues she was suffering from, but still, it was hard to watch. She was there a few weeks and her prognosis was pretty poor. My last shift with her, she was hardly able to raise her arm, but she did, just to tug on my sleeve so I could put Frozen on. So I did. It was otherwise a regular night. I went home and slept and woke up just in time to come back for my next shift. I was expecting to get my same patient assignment, and I saw I had the same room number, but the name was different. There was someone else in her room. I asked what happened, and their faces all fell as they told me she had coded in the morning and they weren't able to get her back. She passed away. I wasn't there. I was totally devastated. I held it together and I didn't cry, but this shift had a heaviness to it. I was really sad and just felt like I was drifting from room to room the whole night. Fast forward to 3 a.m. I needed to go into that room to start the new patient's tube feed. There was nothing on the TV, but the patient was awake. I put on the movie Coco so he would at least have some background noise. As I was starting the pump, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I had goosebumps down my arms. Just as I was about to turn to leave, I felt it. 2 tugs on my sleeve. I froze in place. At first, I felt really afraid, but then I got the most overwhelming rush of emotion all at once. I ran to the bathroom and I cried so hard. It took me a while to gather myself. I splashed water on my face and went back to my desk to chart, trying to shake off what had happened and just tell myself it was impossible. My grief was causing me to imagine things. At 4 a.m., exactly 1 hour later, the feed was done. I went to the room and I paused at the doorway. Frozen was playing. I had only put Coco on 1 hour ago. It couldn't have been finished. I stood there in disbelief. I've never really had anything paranormal happen to me before. But in that moment, I had the warmest feeling. I just knew she was trying to tell me she was okay or something. I can't explain it, but it made me smile. I've been in that room plenty of times since, and nothing weird has ever happened again. It only happened that one night she passed. It's almost like she was saying goodbye. And I'm glad. I would be sad if even in the afterlife she was confined to a hospital room. I like to think that wherever she is, she's free to walk and laugh and watch Frozen on repeat. Anonymous, that story, I was so emotional reading it. I don't know if you can hear it. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to make it through that narration without just bursting into tears. I mean, I was emotional the first time I read it. I was emotional the second time I read it, and I was emotional actually actively narrating it. That was so sad, and yet I know that you got a lot of comfort and probably closure, from feeling those familiar tugs on your sleeve as she wanted to watch Frozen. It's just so sad. And those kids are just there alone without anyone there for them except, you or, your fellow nurses. And, of course she was special to you. Of course she was special to you. She sounds like she was so special. And it sounds like you made such a huge impact on her life. And I know that she was so grateful for you. And oh my God, I'm getting emotional again just talking about this. Oh my God. So, sorry everybody if you're also crying. Actually, I'm not sorry at all because this was such a beautiful, touching story that I am glad if you guys are also crying. So Anonymous, you're doing such an amazing job. I don't know how you do it. The sheer amount of just emotional trauma, the depth of emotional trauma that you have probably experienced in your job dealing with these, poor sick kids. Just, I don't know how you do it. But, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being there for them. Thank you for being there for her and making her smile and just being that, light that she needed. And thank you so much for letting me share your beautiful story. What did I see? Repeated sightings, interacting with me more. What is going on? By Oogerooger. I had some more weird shit happen last night. I took my 2 dogs for walks. I normally walk Finn, large, all black, German Shepherd, toward the park where I have had these experiences, and I walk Booger, Chi Terrier mix, the other direction, toward downtown. On my walk with Finn, about a block away in the direction I was headed, I saw 3 or 4 deer calmly walking toward the park. Most nights where something weird happens to me start like this. The deer seemed completely unbothered by me as I approached. They kept walking toward the park but stopped every few steps to look back at me as if they wanted me to follow them. Then as Finn and I reached where the deer were, I noticed about 10 or more other deer waiting as well. They all start walking together, calm, but still looking back at me every few feet. On my way toward the park, I smell the stench of rotting meat. I know the smell very well as I used to be a butcher. It was strong. Like someone plugged my nostrils with rotting ground meat or something. At the same time I smell this stench, I get the chills. Finn's hair stands up and he gets more nervous. I can feel the air around me get colder. As we continue walking, I look down an alleyway that cuts the block in half, and if you would walk down the dark alley, would spit you out where I eventually walk back home. I was 2 blocks away from the park. When you reach the park, you can either turn around and walk down the same road, you can continue into the park, or you can continue on the road, which turns left. Looking down that alleyway, you are looking at the part of the road that continues left, which is the way I take every night on my way back home. What I saw, I tried to convince myself wasn't real. Or maybe I just saw something else and my brain tried to convince me it was this. A large, muscular, pale, hairless creature that was moving fast. So fast I could barely see it. I saw the motion down the alley about 2 blocks away. The exit of the alley on that side has a street light directly above it. It wasn't standing still, it was moving, and it was moving fast. The only reason I'm positive what I saw wasn't deer or something normal is because of something I saw later that night that I will write about when I talk about my walk with Booger. It solidified that what I saw was something I was not supposed to see. In the meantime, I convinced myself I was making stuff up and being a pussy. As we approached the tree line of the park, the large group of deer moved to the side of the street where the neighborhood is, while I'm on the side with the tree line. I noticed something in the clearing. A lone deer, separate from the large group across the street, staring directly at me. I have my flashlight pointed at him, and I even hung up my call with my wife to use my phone to take video of this moment. This lone deer doesn't even have the micro movements from breathing. The other deer across the street were constantly readjusting. You might be thinking to yourself, oh yeah, deer do that with bright lights shining at them. Deer in headlights always act like that. Just wait. Finn starts to pull very hard and acts anxious, nearly knocking me over. I turn to look across the street towards the large group of deer for at most 3 seconds before quickly turning around to face the lone deer again. In those 3 seconds, that lone deer is easily 30 feet closer to me, still not moving, staring directly at me. I have this on video. I have pictures. I felt weird. I felt unsafe. I've lived in rural Iowa my whole life. I am and have always lived outdoors. This didn't feel normal. I was scared. I back away while shining my light at the deer. Once I get a block or so away, he finally turns around and calmly walks into the tree line. The whole way home, I feel like I'm being stalked, not just watched, but like something is following me. Now, I went home and sat for a bit and tried to talk myself into believing it was all coincidence. After nearly 20 minutes, I started to walk Booger, my smaller chi mix. The entire walk was nice and very enjoyable, actually. I had my earbuds in and was talking to my wife about what I saw in a joking way. Man, I'm such a pussy. I really scared myself for no reason, I said. At the end of the walk, I turned to go down our alleyway as I leave from the garage on our walks. I stopped speaking from what I saw on the opposite end of the alley. My wife heard me stop. I want to preface this with I did not have any substances, including alcohol, for weeks up to that point. The most I ever do in that department is a few beers, or I'll use some weed to ease anxiety if life is getting hard. I have no mental conditions that will cause me to hallucinate. The most I have is a personality disorder resulting from trauma that I've been overcoming quickly this last year. I saw 2 large, muscular, pale, hairless creatures walking like apes at the end of the alley. The same thing I thought I saw with Finn, this time not going fast, much closer, and it felt intentional. I saw them walk across the street very slowly, staring directly at me. These were not deer. They didn't have long faces like deer. They didn't have fur or tails. They didn't walk like deer. They weren't slender like a deer. My first thought was honestly that I was looking at 2 hairless male lions in the middle of Iowa. I stood there, paralyzed with fear, well after they had left my sight. 15 seconds later, I finally get the courage to walk the few feet into the garage. When I take my first step, I see a third one, slowly meandering across the street, staring at me. Booger noticed him too, and started growling. I ran to the door and watched the garage shut all the way. The entire night, Finn guarded the bedroom door. He never does that. He sat staring at the door all night. Booger stared at the windows all night. He never does that either. This happened to me yesterday night, Monday, May 13th, 2024. I don't know what to think. Ooger, I hope that you do not work for the tourist board of Boone, Iowa. Because I gotta tell you, I have no interest in ever visiting your state after reading your stories. For anyone curious, Ooger did share a link with a YouTube video that he took from that night of this story. And you can find the link to that in the show notes if you want to watch it yourself. You'll see 2 glowing yellow dots, and those are I was going to say they're deer eyes, but I guess we don't know that that's a deer. It might be a not deer, which is a whole nother internet rabbit hole for y'all to go down if you are not familiar with the not deer. I saw in the comments that some people do think that maybe this is a not deer. Other people think this is a crawler. I mean, I don't want it to be any of these things. I want this to just be a sick, mangy deer. I know there's got to be all different kinds of deer illnesses, that make them act erratically and want to get closer to you and your giant German Shepherd, Finn. I mean, certainly there has to be something that has a rational explanation. What this actually reminds me of, I have not seen anything like this in my life, but what this actually reminds me of is one night I was driving. It was dark. I was in an unfamiliar neighborhood, not quite lost, but not quite confident in where I was driving. I was alone in the car. I had my lights on, very residential. I'm driving down the street, and in front of me, I see this horrifying sight that, I mean, my blood ran cold. I just felt terrified instantly before I even knew what I was looking at. My brain told me, you are in danger. This is dangerous. Something's wrong. And what I saw, I can only explain as an decrepit, old, withered woman in a white gown flowing behind her, long, black, stringy hair, just absolutely terrifying, and riding a unicycle toward me. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that is what my brain told me my eyes were seeing. And I was just frozen in fear for a split second before I realized that what I was looking at was just someone wearing white, riding a bike, a normal bike with 2 wheels, not one. The point is, it was just a completely, totally normal human being riding a totally normal bicycle. But for some reason, my eyes told me that night that I was seeing this absolutely terrifying apparition on a unicycle coming toward me. So I'm sure you know why I'm saying that. I know that Finn is obviously seeing something and reacting to it. And I saw the video that you posted, and something with glowing eyes definitely got closer to you. But I also hope, for your sake, that maybe your brain is doing to you what mine did to me. And I was sober at the time as well that happened. I don't know why it did that to me. I don't know why it would conjure that image. But, maybe yours was doing that as well. It doesn't sound like it based on your story, but wouldn't it be nice if you could just look back at this and laugh and say, ha ha ha, my brain was just playing tricks on me, and there aren't actually horrible cryptids of unknown origin stalking me and my dogs. Wouldn't that be nice? Thank you to Anonymous and Oogerooger for submitting your stories. And thank you so much for stopping by for such a lovely, spooky time. You're always welcome here. It's perfect timing, really. Looks like the rain just stopped. Now, remember, if any of the strangeness scared you, remind yourself that you can feel afraid and not be in danger. You're safe here with me. Until next time. Madame Strangeways is produced and narrated by me, Madame Strangeways. Theme music is by Marina Ryan at marinamakes.co. You can submit your own strange story at madamestrangeways.com or send in your thoughts or theories on the stories in this episode to madamestrangeways@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.